In this movie, we look at how to control the vertical spacing of our text. Now we can control the height of our lines and control the vertical alignment. So first, let's look at the line height. In traditional print design, this is referred to as leading. Leading essentially controls how much space one line of text will take up, and it is another way that we can control the overall tone of a segment of text. Now, how much space our leading is taking up is by default calculated by how our text is resting on what's called our baseline. And our baseline is that invisible line that all of our text seems to be resting on. So if we take a look at this word leading, we end up seeing that all of these letters are stopping on this invisible line, except for our G. Now the G has this little tail that's kind of swooping down, and that's called a descender. Then up above here, we have this kind of common height right here, and that's referred to as our X height, and that's where most of our lowercase letters stop. Now things that go above that, like this D, is known as an ascender. And then we have our cap height, which tends to be a little bit higher than our ascenders in some of our fonts. However, some other fonts, our ascenders are a little bit higher than our cap height. So that's kind of the anatomy of our font. What the leading does is make it so that we have additional space below how much space is actually being taken up by our font and above. So what we have with our leading is control over how much space one line of text will take up. So by default, we have that 120%. So our font is taking up 100% because, well, that's what's designated for the font. And then we have an additional 20% of buffer space that's separated between our above and below that particular line of text. Now, even though we have this 120% by default, we can end up using whatever measurement system we want whenever we use our line height property. So here we can say, I want line height to be 5em. And that will make it so that we have 5ems of space for that particular line. Now before we see this in action, let's go ahead and take a look at our control for vertical alignment. Now vertical alignment is going to allow us to align our text in orientation to that baseline of our surrounding text. So this is going to be in orientation to that invisible line that all of our text is sitting on. So typically this is going to need to be applied to a selection inside of a line for us to really see an effect. Now with our vertical align, we have a number of options here. We have top, baseline, middle, and bottom. Now baseline is the normal thing that is set up by default. However, top will make it so that we're aligning our text to the top of the space that's available. Our baseline will stay where it is. The middle will align the middle up with the baseline, and bottom will align the bottom. Now let's go ahead and jump over into our project and see our control for line height and vertical align at play. So the first thing I'm going to do here is jump over to my main.css, and I'm going to move on down here to the sidebar area where I'm going to put in a rule for about. Now, of course, the about region has not been set up yet, but I need to modify my HTML document anyway, so I'll go ahead and set this up first. And I'll set that line height to 1em. Now, 1em here is going to be smaller than the default because the default is approximately the same as 1.2em, because that's 120%. 1.2em is essentially the same thing as 120%. So this is going to make the tone of the about box a little bit more dense. Now I also want to go ahead and jump down here to the bottom, and I'm going to modify our smaller I'm going to change this to superscript. And more or less, this is a way that you can combine some of the styles that we have to create more or less a superscript. So I already have smaller text here. Now I just need to set the vertical align to top, and it's going to make our text move up towards the top of our line height. Okay, so now I need to save that. There we go. And then jump over into my HTML and then make a couple modifications there. First of all, I need to change where my smaller was, change that to superscript, and then find my about box and put in a div there. Now the reason why I'm having to put in so many divs is because there are no structures that are currently available that will actually contain what region I'm trying to set up. I can't use a paragraph tag because my about region includes that H2. So, I'm kind of stuck having to add in these extra div tags. So there we go. I'll save that. And whenever I jump back into my browser here, I will see the about region kind of shrink up, becoming a little bit more dense. And then I'll see the last 3 letters of news go up towards the top of this letter N. So let me go ahead and refresh. And about shrinks up, and the last 3 letters do go up. So we now have a way that we can kind of create superscripts just by manipulating our vertical line and font size, and we can control the density of a paragraph of text by controlling the line height. Now that concludes our look at vertical spacing with CSS.